The first thing Nivy Thale noticed about Galactic University Station Orelise Theta was that it was too clean. Sterile. Polished to a reflective gleam, like no one had ever cried in the hallways or argued about failed exams in the corners of the student lounges. Everything gleamed like it had something to prove. Maybe that's why she didn't trust it. Today, the lecture hall was crammed with more bodies than usual, bodies of all shapes and species, from gas-breathing synthetics to spindly-furred lorvets, to the glassy-eyed Myri who blinked twice every 10 seconds in eerie synchrony. Nivy was the only one slouched in the back row, her boots scuffed, her hoodie crumpled, and her expression bordering on vacant. She didn't look like someone interested in xenobiological gravitic cross-theory. Mostly because she wasn't. Today's topic, Professor Thilmer Veenox began, sweeping a clawed hand across the glowing lecture orb, is a matter of exquisite elegance, though I regret some of you may lack the genetic and cognitive predisposition to grasp it fully. His voice always sounded like melted silver poured over ice. Beautiful, cold, and condescending enough to make your skin crawl. He was sleek and angular, his purple-tinged exoskin pulsing with soft bioluminescent flickers as he paced the front of the hall like a man rehearsing for a standing ovation. His long facial spines twitched with amusement. The students closest to him nodded reverently. Some scribbled notes, others adjusted neural sync visors that streamed information directly to their brains. The lecture orb flared with a series of spinning molecular structures and mathematical forms written in no less than 6 interlingua dialects. Nivy yawned. She twirled her stylus lazily, then set it down on her desk, folding her arms across her chest. From where she sat, the universe looked far more interesting through the viewport behind the professor, the luminous sweep of the Sylvis Nebula curling like stained glass across the void. Her attention drifted to the distant glimmer of freighter ships weaving through the outer orbit lanes. She liked watching them. Something about their slow, steady motion was calming. Predictable. Let us consider, Veenox drawled, the baseline traits of species from high-gravity versus low-gravity origin worlds. For example, humans. Nivy's gaze didn't waver from the stars. But internally, she sighed. Here we go again. Remarkably primitive, the professor continued, and yet astonishingly durable. A contradiction in biological architecture, wouldn't you say? The hologram morphed to show a human skeleton rotating beside a sleek alien frame. Dense bone mass. Inefficient energy distribution. Laughable regenerative capacity. And let's not even begin on their chaotic neural processes. A few students chuckled. One of the Mirith girls, a pale green humanoid with translucent eyelids, covered her mouth, giggling into her hand. Nivy heard them. Every whisper. Every snort. Every sideways glance. She was used to it. This was how it always went. Humans were adorable, tough but clumsy, brilliant in that accidental, explosive way, like throwing fire into a cave and calling it innovation. They all underestimated her. Which, on good days, was a tactical advantage. On bad days, it was exhausting. But perhaps, Veenox said, voice now thick with syrupy disdain, our human friends would like to attempt a contribution. Miss Thale, if you would. Nivy slowly lifted her head. The murmurs quieted. The spotlight adjusted. She blinked against it. Me? She asked. Of course. You're the only one not paying attention. Perhaps you can explain the significance of this equation. He gestured at the projection behind him, a spindling thread of numbers and symbols rotating through 10 dimensions of colored light. Nivy stared at it. Really stared. Her mind didn't race. It didn't need to. She was different. Always had been. While other students studied for days, Nivy dreamed in mathematics. Her childhood notebooks were filled with symphonies written in code, theorems scribbled on napkins, song lyrics embedded with prime sequences. She didn't memorize physics. She understood it. The way a bird understands the sky. The way you understand your mother's voice without needing translation. She tilted her head. Your model's faulty, she said simply. Vinox's biolights flared in disbelief. Excuse me? The equation. Your fold collapse math assumes symmetry at stage 4. But the gravity vector doesn't cancel. It reverses. He narrowed his eyes. How would you? Your error compounds in the final rotation. So instead of decay, you get recursion. The entire room went still. Even the translator drones hovered silently, waiting. Nivy pulled her tablet, scribbled a string of variables, and without permission, slung the projection into the main lecture field. The model shifted, recalculated, and then locked. A perfect, harmonious resolution shimmered into place. The display emitted a soft chime. Some of the students gasped. Others stared like she'd just birthed a black hole with her bare hands. Professor Vinox, for the first time in years, faltered. That's not in the recognized models. Nivy shrugged, standing up. Well, maybe the recognized models need updating. And then, to a wave of stunned silence, she walked toward the exit. She didn't look back. Outside, the corridor hummed with soft atmospheric music and the low thrum of a distant engine core. Nivy's boots echoed as she passed mural-covered walls of station history, portraits of founders, crystalline awards, and the occasional ancient artifact of planetary origin. She didn't head toward the dorms. Or the library. Or anywhere academic. Instead, she stepped into the green observation deck, a quiet corner of the station no one really visited between classes. There were plants here. Real ones. Not synthetics. Soft mosses from Kirill. Ivy vines that clung to the walls with gentle insistence. A small waterfall trickled down a stone sculpture. Artificial gravity was slightly lower in here, just enough to make everything feel floaty. Dreamlike. Nivy sat on a bench and let her breath settle. But then. You left before the applause, came a voice behind her. Nivy stiffened. She turned slowly. A tall figure stepped out from behind a pillar, luminescent and quiet. He was stunning, in the way alien elegance often was. Not because of symmetrical features or sculpted build, but because he looked like he belonged in a different element entirely. Like someone crafted of music and moonlight. You're one of the students, Nivy said. Cale Duran, he offered. His voice was smooth, warm. Almost hesitant. I'm in the Xenocultural Diplomacy cohort. Sounds fancy. Mostly it's long lectures and trying not to offend people with too many eyes. He sat on the bench opposite hers, at a respectful distance. She looked at him. Waited. He didn't look smug. Or judgmental. Or even curious in that condescending way most aliens got around humans. Just, interested. How did you do that? He asked. In class. She shrugged. It's just math. No, he said gently. It was more. Your correction vector was beautiful. Nivy blinked. You thought an 11-dimensional symmetry loop was beautiful? It resonated, Cale said. In the same way a harmonic chord does. You understand sound too. I study music, she admitted. Composition, mostly. Then it makes sense. Nivy tilted her head. What does? He smiled, slow and soft. You hear the math. That's why it worked. Something about that made her stomach flutter. And not in a bad way. Cale watched her for a moment longer, then reached into his satchel and pulled out a folded strip of canvas. It unfolded into a tiny, portable chime harp, Valerie design. Delicate, with light reactive strings. Play something, he asked. She hesitated. But, she reached for it. Her fingers danced across the strings, coaxing out a quiet, spiraling melody, an echo of the symmetry she'd just built in equations, now looping in music. Cale closed his eyes, smiling. They sat like that for a long time. Two students. Two species. Two lives slowly beginning to share the same rhythm. The cafeteria on Station Orleans Theta was a cacophony of clashing cultures. Synthetic aromas floated through humid vents, char-infused proteigreens from celery plates, bubbling nutrient soups favored by the Trovican, and at least 3 kinds of fermented protein cubes from worlds Kale had never visited. He usually liked it here. The noise helped him think. But today, all he could think about was the girl who had destroyed a century-old theorem while wearing a hoodie and looking like she hadn't slept in a week. He kept hearing her voice. Your model's faulty. Flat. Disinterested. Like the entire structure of interstellar physics bored her. Like she could see through its bones. He wasn't just impressed. He was drawn to her. And that was a problem. The fallery didn't fall quickly. Affection, to them, was a slow dance, each emotional step methodical, layered. Kale had only felt that magnetic shift once before. And it had ended like a star map burned through at the edges. But this was different. Nivy Thale wasn't gentle. She wasn't trying to charm anyone. And that honesty, it carved through his ribs like gravity. He spotted her at the edge of the room, seated alone in the corner with a dented metal tray in front of her. Half of her food was untouched. She was drawing something on a napkin with a broken stylus. He gathered his courage, cleared his throat, and stepped into her orbit. Is this seat taken? She didn't look up immediately. Then, without any particular emotion, she nodded to the chair opposite hers. Help yourself. He slid into it slowly. The silence between them was thick. She didn't speak. Just kept sketching lines and curves on her napkin. Kale tilted his head, trying not to stare. What is that? A sound structure, she replied. Based on the gravitational sequence from earlier. Figured it'd make a good rhythm line. For a song. For something. He smiled. You always translate physics into music. Only the beautiful parts. A pause. Ugly math doesn't deserve harmony. Kale felt something ripple in his chest. That's poetic. No, it's practical. She looked up, finally. Her eyes were darker than he remembered. There was a tired sharpness in them, like she expected him to mock her at any moment. He didn't. Instead, he said, you made me hear it differently. The equation. It sang. Her brow furrowed slightly. You're not just being nice. He laughed softly. I'm Fallery. We don't lie about resonance. It's kind of sacred. She considered that. Then, for the first time since he'd sat down, she smiled. It was small. Crooked. But it changed her whole face. What's it like? She asked, tilting her head. Your world. He thought for a moment. Like, breathing color. Fallery is saturated. The atmosphere hums. Our rivers are bioluminescent. Most of us grow up learning to sing with light. Sing with light, her expression sharpened with real interest. He nodded. Our voices influence the spectrum. It's emotional. Like your music. We shape wavelengths. Nivy blinked. You manipulate physics with your feelings. He shrugged, modestly. Only a little. It's more of an art than a science. No such thing, she said, and it didn't sound dismissive, it sounded like a challenge. He found himself grinning. And Earth? He asked. Her smile faded. She looked down at her napkin. Earth's, loud. Not just in sound. In everything. People yell across the street for no reason. Cars scream by like they're escaping something. And the sky's always doing something dangerous. Kale watched her carefully. I didn't think it'd be quiet out there, he said softly. It's not, she met his gaze again. But it teaches you how to listen. He didn't speak for a moment. Neither did she. In that silence, he realized, they understood each other. Not because they shared a culture. Not because they had similar dreams. But because they both listened. "Do people talk to you much here?" he asked gently. Nivy made a face. "Some do. Mostly when they want something. Or when they think they're being clever." "And do you talk back?" "Depends. Are they worth my time?" He laughed again. "What about me?" She studied him. Longer than was comfortable. "Then, ask me a real question, and I'll let you know." He swallowed. Then leaned in slightly. "Why do you hide how smart you are?" She blinked. The smile disappeared. Not because she was angry. But because she wasn't expecting it. "Is that what you think I'm doing?" "I think," he said carefully, "you don't want anyone to know what you're capable of." "Not really." Her jaw tensed. She looked away. The tray between them was now empty, she'd eaten while distracted, and he hadn't noticed. Her hands were clenched. "You ever been told your whole life that being too much was a problem?" she asked quietly. "That if you're too good, people get scared. Or worse, jealous. Or they use you. Or they pretend you're something you're not just so they can understand you." His chest tightened. "Yes." She looked at him sharply. "Really?" Valerie diplomacy students are trained to dim ourselves. Especially around more fragile species. If we glow too brightly, some think it's arrogance. If we speak too boldly, it's manipulation. Her shoulders dropped a little. "So," he said softly, "I get it." She stared at him. Then, almost imperceptibly, she nodded. The moment passed like a silent chord resolving into harmony. They sat in peace, for a while. Then she said, "You want to hear the full sequence? The one you wrote on the napkin? The one from the equation? Translated into sound?" He nodded eagerly. She tapped a few controls on her wristband, opened an old interface, manual, analog, clunky, and loaded something that sounded like starlight being poured into glass. The melody unfurled, soft and strange. It was haunting. Delicate. Like a cry from a creature that lived beneath an ocean of stars. Cale listened with his whole body. When it ended, he whispered, "You made the paradox, sing." Nivy gave a lopsided smile. "I'm starting to think you might actually mean that." He leaned forward. And said, barely above a whisper. "You scare them because you remind them they're not the only ones who can rewrite the rules." She didn't reply. She didn't have to. Her fingers curled toward him, just slightly, across the tabletop. Not touching. Not even close. But inviting. And for Valerie, that gesture was louder than a declaration. Sierra Kellen could hear everything. Not in the metaphorical sense, she wasn't emotionally intuitive or particularly sensitive. She just literally heard everything. Centauri had quad-layer auditory membranes and resonance-sensitive nerve clusters along their jaw ridges. The result, a race of natural eavesdroppers. And right now, sitting at the far end of the campus amphitheater, she could hear Cale Duran laughing. It was a soft sound. Not the polite hum he offered professors. Not the restrained chuckle he gave at diplomatic gatherings. No, this laugh was real. Unguarded. And it came from a table where Nivy Thales sat beside him, elbows on the table, mouth half-curled in that cocky little half-smile that had made Sierra's head buzz since the first day she'd met her. Sierra clenched her claws into the sides of her datapad. For days now, she'd watched them orbit each other. Cale, glowing, literally, whenever Nivy spoke. Nivy, hiding her smiles like they were state secrets. And Sierra? She just listened. And waited for it to hurt a little less. She wasn't bitter. Not exactly. She knew what Cale was. What he wasn't. He was kind and careful and slow to move. Which meant the way he had moved, with Nivy, meant something. It meant she'd gotten past his walls. It meant he saw her. Sierra had spent 2 years watching him navigate the galaxy with calm logic and quiet curiosity. 2 years hoping his attention would drift her way. And now, he was laughing like a boy in love. She closed her eyes, trying to silence the memory of how Cale used to look at her when they sang together in harmonic theory. How he'd glance over mid-resonance, eyes warm, mouth curved in concentration. She used to think those glances meant something. Now she wasn't so sure. She needed air. Or, since the station didn't have air in the natural sense, she needed space. The central garden dome of Station Orelise Theta had always been her sanctuary. It wasn't truly outdoors, but it was the closest thing the university offered. Plants from 17 worlds tangled together in curated chaos, whisper vines from Kel, hovering glow orbs from Murash, and soft grasses that sang when the wind vents opened. She sat on the far end of the garden bridge, letting her legs dangle into nothingness. Below, a simulated river flowed in a lazy spiral, echoing sounds from real oceans uploaded from students' home planets. It was here, 2 years ago, that Cale had first asked her what it was like to dream in 3 languages. She'd told him it was lonely. He hadn't said anything. He'd just sat beside her and listened. And now, he sat next to someone else. Someone sharper. Funnier. Someone who solved gravity paradoxes like they were crossword puzzles. Someone who didn't care if people stared. Sierra exhaled. And then, because the universe was cruel and timing was a weapon, Nivy walked into the dome. Alone. She froze when she saw Sierra. Their eyes locked for a second. Sierra could have looked away. But she didn't. "Hey," Nivy said, brushing her hair back. "Hey. Mind if I," she gestured to the bench. Sierra nodded slowly. Nivy sat beside her, not close enough to touch, but close enough to feel. The kind of silence that stretched without snapping. "Cale's worried about you," Nivy said finally. Sierra raised an eyebrow. "He sent you?" "No, I came because, I think I needed to." "Why?" Nivy glanced at the vines overhead. Her voice softened. "Because you were his first." Sierra blinked. "What?" "Not like that," Nivy said quickly. "But the first person he connected with here. First one he sang with. First friend." Sierra felt her chest tighten. "And now?" "Now, he's changing orbit." They sat in silence again. This time it felt heavier. "You love him," Nivy said gently. "I thought I did," Sierra admitted. "Maybe I still do. Maybe I just miss being chosen." Nivy was quiet. "Then, I don't want to hurt you." Sierra turned to her. "You didn't. It just happened. Doesn't mean it doesn't sting. Do you love him?" The question dropped between them like a flare. Nivy's shoulders tensed. "I don't know. But you could." "Yeah." And that, somehow, made it worse. Sierra looked away, jaw clenched. "You know," she said after a long pause, "the first time he sang with me, he said I made light taste like language." Nivy's mouth curved, bittersweet. "That sounds like him. But he never glowed for me like he does with you." Nivy's face fell slightly. "I see the way you two move," Sierra continued. "Like you're caught in each other's gravity well. It's inevitable." Nivy didn't speak. She didn't need to. 2 days later, Sierra was alone in the translation lab when the simulation alarms went off. Critical systems fault, station climate regulator offline. Containment breach imminent. Students scattered from the halls as a cooling module ruptured, flooding Deck 6 with vaporized nitrogen. Sierra was trapped on a subdeck when the power grid crashed, door seals engaged, emergency lights flickering. And then, through the haze and cold, came footsteps. Sierra. Nivy. Jacket zipped, eyes narrowed, teeth clenched. She kicked open the emergency override and scrambled inside. What, how, Sierra stammered. Cale said you were in here. The schematics are old. I mapped a shortcut. Sierra gaped. You came back into a lockdown zone for me. Nivy grinned, teeth chattering. Well, yeah. Kind of a problem if you freeze your language centers off. She offered a hand. Sierra took it. And something shifted. Not jealousy. Not sadness. Just understanding. You really would break a universe for someone you care about, Sierra whispered. Nivy shrugged. Or at least a few rules. Together, they climbed through the maintenance hatch and escaped before the emergency seal collapsed behind them. By the time they reached the surface corridor, both of them were breathless. Sierra turned to her and, for the first time, smiled without armor. You know, she said, I think I get it now. Get what? Why he glows for you. Nivy blinked. Because you don't make him hide any part of himself. Later that week, as the two of them stood beside Cale in the garden dome, Sierra looked at her friend, and the girl he was slowly falling in love with, and felt peace for the first time in weeks. She let go. Not because it didn't still ache. But because sometimes, the orbit shifts. And letting someone drift wasn't always losing them. Sometimes, it was freeing yourself to find a new gravity. Tuvin Mar wasn't a ghost. He just liked pretending to be one. He moved through Station Aurelis Theta like dark matter, unseen, unmeasured, yet always there, tugging at the edges of things. People rarely noticed him, even when he sat in the same lecture hall. Even when he aced the same exams. He preferred it that way. He wasn't built for crowds or praise. He was built for silence. And for watching. Lately, he'd been watching Nivy fail. Not because of the physics stunt, though, sure, that had gotten the whole university buzzing, but because of what happened after. The whispers. The way her name started showing up in side-channel data streams. The way some of the professors began reviewing her enrollment status more often than was necessary. It was the smell of academic sabotage. And Tuvin knew that smell far too well. 2 years ago, he'd lost someone to it. Joanna. Bright, impossible Joanna, who'd once reprogrammed a pulsar simulator to play jazz rhythms during finals week. She'd published a paper, groundbreaking, elegant, too far ahead of its time. A professor had taken credit. The committee had believed him. Her reputation had vanished in under a week. She'd left quietly. Didn't even say goodbye. He wouldn't let that happen again. He started combing the back-end systems. Not hacking, exactly, just listening to the static between the lines. Seeing what other people ignored. Encrypted file audits. Decision logs. Odd authorization tags on Nivy's academic record. A name kept showing up. Professor Tyler Narvis. Head of the Institutional Integrity Board. Cold. Methodical. Famously unbiased. And very good at covering his tracks. Except this time, he wasn't just reviewing grades. He was quietly building a case. Fabricated plagiarism flags. References to suspicious test scores, a flagged note titled, Possible Mimetic Interference Origin, Unverified. Tuvin felt his gut twist. They were going to try to expel her. No due process. No hearing. Just silence. He needed to warn her. He found her alone in the rehearsal chamber, glass panels, sound field buffers, a place where music could exist without judgment. She was sketching chord structures on the wall display, half humming a melody that made his chest ache. You know that won't protect you, he said quietly. She jumped. Turned. Her eyes narrowed. You're, Tuvin. He nodded. You don't know me. But I know what they're doing. She blinked. What who's doing? He crossed the room in 3 careful steps and passed her his data tablet. Read the authorization logs. Her fingers froze halfway down the screen. Why? She whispered. Because you're better than them. And that scares them. But this is supposed to be merit-based. Objective. He gave her a look. She scoffed, bitter. Right. Of course. Objective, until a human outperforms their algorithms. They're calling you a mimetic anomaly, he said softly. They think I'm a virus? He nodded. Nivy looked like she was trying not to cry. They can't get away with this, she said. Kale will. Kale's the reason they haven't already shut you down, Tuvin interrupted. He's got clout. Diplomatic backing. But if you get expelled, even he can't. So what do I do? She asked, her voice cracking. Tuvin exhaled. For a long moment, the silence pulsed between them like a heartbeat. Then he said, you fight. She didn't fight alone. When the summons came, an emergency review panel, to examine the integrity of student record submissions, Nivy showed up not in her hoodie, but in a crisp black suit jacket and a thin copper band braided through her hair. Kale stood beside her, bioluminescence dimmed but eyes bright with fury. Tuvin stood 2 seats behind, tapping quietly into the tribunal's private uplink. When Narvis made his opening statement, listing concerns about irregular performance statistics, Nivy raised her hand before he could finish. I'd like to speak directly, she said. Students. You accused me, she snapped. I get to respond. Narvis hesitated. Then nodded. Nivy stepped forward. This institution prides itself on logic, truth, and fair inquiry. I'm here because I was good at something you didn't expect me to be good at. Not just because I'm human, but because I didn't ask your permission to be extraordinary. The room murmured. She continued. I'm not going to pretend I'm average to make you feel better. I'm not going to apologize for a brain that hears gravity like a song. And if you're so afraid of that, then maybe it's not me who doesn't belong here. The silence that followed was so absolute, it rang. Kale reached for her hand. And this time, she didn't pull away. After the hearing, Tuvin stayed in the shadows. He didn't want applause. He just wanted her safe. But Nivy found him anyway. Cornered him in the corridor outside Lab 6. You saved me, she said. He shook his head. You saved yourself. I just nudged the current. She smiled. A real one. For what it's worth, she said, Joanna would have been proud of you. He stiffened. She saw it. Yeah, she said softly. I knew her. He stared at her. Speechless. She used to mentor the younger music students. Gave me my first real composition challenge. Told me I was going to break things. Nivy's voice grew quiet. She meant it as a compliment. Tuvin swallowed hard. She believed in people like you, Nivy said. And now, so do I. Later that night, he watched from the upper balcony of the observation deck as Nivy and Kale stood beneath the simulated aurora, whispering things only they could hear. And for the first time in a long while, Tuvin felt something like peace. Not because everything was fair now. But because silence, when shared with the right people, could finally become something else. Music.